range officer raised his hand and the line went quiet. 7 days of competition were about to begin, and the windsock at 300 meters barely moved. Mara Whitehorse stood at lane 14, her rifle case resting against her boot. The case was scarred along the edges, the strap repaired twice with stitching that did not match. Next to her, lane 15 held a rifle worth more than her unit's annual equipment budget. The man in lane 15 was Dmitry Kessler, 3-time podium finisher, decorated by a Foreign Special Operations Command that every shooter on this line recognized by reputation alone. He looked at her case the way a man looks at a stray dog that wandered onto a parade ground. "That's your rifle?" he said, loud enough for the row behind them to hear. He did not wait for an answer. "I'll save everyone the suspense. She will not make it to day 7. A few shooters laughed, one did not. An older official near the scoring tent looked up from his clipboard, then looked back down as if deciding the comment was not yet his problem. Mara did not raise her voice. She did not look at Kessler. She opened the case, lifted the rifle out with both hands, and checked the bolt with a sound that cut through the noise on the line, a clean metallic click that made 2 people nearby flinch. "We'll see," she said. Nothing more. She chambered around. The windsock moved an inch. She did not look at it twice. She had already read it. Hold on that detail because it matters more than the bet does. The targets at 300 meters were the easy ones, the ones nobody remembered by the final day. But she put 3 rounds inside a group the size of a coin, and the spotter at her station went still before he called it in. Kessler did not hear the call. He was already walking back to his own bench, already laughing with someone else, already certain the bet was as good as won. He had no idea the worn case at lane 14 belonged to a unit nobody had bothered to look up. The first day ended with Mara sitting in 4th place. Nobody printed that on a banner. Nobody mentioned her name in the evening briefing, where the announcer ran through the top 3 finishers and then moved straight to logistics for day 2. Kessler finished 2nd. He told a small crowd near the equipment tent that the standings would sort themselves out once the real shooting started, the kind that mattered, the kind that took nerve instead of luck. Mara cleaned her rifle at a folding table outside the barracks tent, alone. The cordite smell from the day's shooting still clung to her sleeves. She field-stripped the bolt, wiped it down, checked the worn stock for cracks that were not there yet but might be soon. A young competitor from a Baltic team stopped near her table, watched her hands for a moment, then asked in careful English why her unit had sent only 1 shooter. "Budget," Mara said, "and they didn't think we'd need more than 1. He did not laugh at that. He just nodded slowly, like he understood something about small units that the men inside the equipment tent did not. Day 2 opened with a 600-meter stage, the kind where wind became the real opponent. Kessler shot first in his group and posted a strong score, loud enough that the scoring tent could hear him say so himself. Mara shot 11th. She read the flag at the 8-minute mark, adjusted half a click, and waited through a lull that most shooters would have rushed. "Read that again." She waited. Her group came back tighter than Kessler's. The range officer, reading scores, paused for half a second longer than he needed to, then read her number out loud without comment, the way a man reads something he is not yet ready to react to. Kessler heard the number from across the firing line. He did not say anything that time. But he looked over at lane 14 for the first time since the bet, and what he saw was not the rifle. It was her hands, steady on the case, already packing up. That was the moment the bet quietly stopped being a joke and became something closer to a problem. By day 3, the official standing sheet posted outside the scoring tent for anyone to read put Mara in the 3rd place overall. Kessler held 1st. A South American marksman named Costa held 2nd. No one stopped to read her name twice. The Pentagon liaison team, 3 observers in plain civilian jackets who had arrived that morning to audit the international scoring protocol, walked the line slowly, clipboards in hand, stopping at the top 3 lanes to note shooter information. They stopped at Kessler's bench. They stopped at Costa's. At lane 14, the senior observer glanced at the sheet, glanced at Mara, and moved on without a word. She watched him go and said nothing. Her jaw stayed level, her hands stayed still on the rifle case. That kind of silence costs something, but not from the person carrying it. Day 3's stage tested 800 meters in a crosswind that had already knocked 2 favored shooters out of medal contention. Mara's spotter, a quiet corporal named Reyes, assigned to assist any shooter without dedicated support staff, called the wind for her in short, clipped numbers. She did not need many of them. She had already started reading the flag herself, the same way she had read deer trails and ridge wind back home long before anyone handed her a scorecard. Her group held. Her score moved her into a tie for second. This time, the range officer did not read her number quietly. He read it twice, the second time slower, like he wanted to be sure he had it right. Kessler's group, by contrast, opened wider than it had all week. He blamed the wind. Costa said nothing and recorded something in a small notebook he carried everywhere. If you've been counting the favorites who started doubting themselves this week, you already know where this is going. Tell me in the comments which one cracks first. The Pentagon observers had not come back to lane 14, but one of them, walking back toward the scoring tent, stopped mid-stride and looked over his shoulder at the new tie for second place. He did not write anything down, not yet. Day 4 brought the 1,100-meter stage. The one competitors called the separator. 3 shooters had already withdrawn from medal contention by lunch, their scores wrecked by a stage that punished hesitation more than bad aim. Mara waited in the holding area with Reyes, who had started showing up at her bench without being assigned there anymore. He had simply decided this was where he wanted to be standing. "They're going to put you up against Kessler's group today," he said. "Same firing order." "I know," she said. She was checking her data book, the small worn notebook where she logged every wind read, every elevation correction, every mistake she had made since she was 17 years old, shooting at jackrabbits on her grandfather's land because the rifle had been the only one in the house, and somebody had to learn to use it right. The Baltic shooter who had spoken to her on day 1 passed by and offered something close to a nod. The kind 2 competitors give each other when neither one is ready to call the other a rival yet, but both already know. When the stage opened, Kessler shot first. His group was good, not great. He glanced over at Mara's lane between shots, and for the first time all week, the glance lingered a half-second too long, like a man checking a door he had assumed was locked. I have heard men laugh like that before, and it never ends well for the laughing. Mara's first 2 shots landed clean. Her third drifted wide, just barely, caught by a gust Reyes had called late by a half a second. The miss cost her a full point. She did not flinch. She did not look at her data book again. She adjusted, called her own correction under her breath, and put the next 2 rounds back inside the ring, like the miss had never happened. The scoring tent logged her recovery before they logged Kessler's total. That was new. Nobody had logged her first. The senior Pentagon observer, the one who had walked past lane 14 without writing anything down, was standing closer to her bench now than the rules technically required. He still said nothing, but he was watching her hands, not the scoreboard. Day 5 opened under a sky the color of wet concrete, low clouds pressing the heat down onto the range instead of letting it lift. The stage was 1,400 meters, the longest distance the competition had used so far, and the wind kept shifting direction every few minutes like it could not decide what kind of day this was going to be. Kessler's rifle case had a new sticker on it that morning, small and gold, the kind a sponsor sends when they think a win is close enough to bet on. He saw Mara notice it and smiled like a man who had already spent the money. "Still using the antique?" he said, nodding at her case as they waited for the range to clear. "I respect the commitment to the bit." A few people near the holding area laughed, quieter than the first day's laugh, more uncertain, the kind of laugh that comes from people who are not sure anymore whether the joke still lands. Mara opened her case. The stock had a new scratch near the grip, the kind that comes from years, not weeks. She ran her thumb over it once before lifting the rifle. "It's not an antique," she said. "It's just paid for." Kessler's smile thinned a little at that, though he covered it by turning back to his own bench. The 1,400-meter stage broke 2 more shooters outright, including Costa, whose group opened so wide his spotter stopped calling corrections halfway through, as if there was nothing left worth correcting. Mara's first shot landed high. She did not chase it. She waited a full 30 seconds, watching the flag fight itself in 2 directions, then sent the second round on a read that made Reyes go quiet beside her. The round landed dead center. That is not a small thing at 1,400 meters, and everyone on that line who understood ballistics knew it immediately. The senior Pentagon observer, standing closer to her lane than he had any official reason to, said something quietly to the observer beside him. Neither of them wrote it down. Both of them kept watching. The joke about the rifle did not die quietly. By the evening of day 5, it had turned into something closer to a running bit among the foreign teams, the kind of story competitors tell each other in the mess line, because it is easier than admitting the standings have stopped making sense. Someone had started calling her case the museum piece. It was not said to her face anymore. It traveled behind her instead, the way unkind things do when the people saying them have started to feel less sure of themselves. Reyes told her about it that night, not because he thought it would hurt her, but because he thought she should hear it from someone who respected her before she heard it from someone who did not. She listened. She did not ask who said it. "Let them have the joke," she said. "I'll keep the rifle." If you want to know exactly when arrogance starts running out of road, it is usually right around the moment it has to invent a nickname for the thing that keeps beating it. Day 6 was the second-to-last stage, 1,600 meters, and the range felt different that morning. Fewer jokes near the holding area, more clipboards. The Pentagon observers had stopped pretending they were only there for the top 3 lanes. Their walk down the line now included a long, deliberate pause at lane 14 every single time. Kessler noticed the pause. He noticed it the way a man notices a draft in a room he thought was sealed. His group on the 1,600-meter stage was technically sound, posted within striking distance of first place. Mara's group landed tighter, narrow enough that the scoring tent called for a manual remeasurement before they would confirm it. The remeasurement confirmed her number exactly. Kessler did not say anything about the rifle that day, not once. If this channel has earned a few seconds of your support, the pinned comment is where that turns into the next story, like this one. Day 7 began before sunrise, with frost still on the range flags and a stillness that felt different from the previous 6 mornings. This was the final stage, the one the program listed simply as Distance Event Final, with no number attached because the organizers had not finalized which distance they would use until conditions were confirmed at dawn. The senior Pentagon observer arrived early, before most competitors had finished their coffee. He stood near the scoring tent with 2 colleagues, all 3 reviewing a printed sheet that the head range officer had handed them without comment. Mara saw the number on that sheet before anyone announced it publicly. 2,300 meters, longer than anything used in the competition's history, a distance normally reserved for record attempt exhibitions, not a scored final stage. I should tell you now, authority looks different when it finally has no choice but to pay attention. The announcement went out over the range loudspeaker at 7 a.m. 2,300 meters, one shot per competitor, top three from the overall standing shooting last. Kessler would shoot in the final group. Mara, tied for second after the remeasurement, would shoot in the final group as well. Costa had been quietly eliminated from medal contention the day before. He stood near the fence now, not competing, just watching, arms crossed, the notebook he had carried all week closed in his jacket pocket. Kessler ran his hand along his rifle case twice before the call to the line, a habit Mara had not seen him do before. The sponsor sticker on his case had started to peel at one corner. Reyes checked the data book with her one final time, reading back her dope at 2,300 meters as she had calculated it the night before, adjusting for the morning's colder, denser air. "You've made longer calls than this," he said. "Not in front of this many people," she said. Then she picked up the case, the worn one, the one with the mismatched stitching, and walked toward the line. The range had never been this quiet before. A stage began. The first two shooters in the final group went before Kessler and Mara. Both were strong competitors, both had podiumed in past championships, and both missed clean on the 2,300-meter target. Not close misses, the kind of misses that come from a calculation built on assumptions that stop working at that distance, where curvature and spin drift and a dozen other invisible variables start arguing with each other in ways that punish even excellent shooters. The crowd, larger now than it had been all week, went quiet both times. A misty rain had started, fine enough that it barely registered on skin, but heavy enough to change every wind call on the line. Kessler shot third. He took his time, longer than his usual rhythm, checking his scope twice, adjusting his elevation dial with visible care. His shot landed low and left, a clear miss, but not a humiliating one, respectable by the standard of what 2,300 meters demanded. He stepped back from his rifle slowly, jaw tight, and did not look toward lane 14. Look at her hands, not the room, because the room had already started arguing about what it had just seen. Two more shooters went after Kessler. One missed by a wide margin. The other landed a shot close enough to the target's edge that the crowd actually gasped, certain for a moment that the championship's first clean hit at this distance had just happened. The scoring tent reviewed the footage. The shot had clipped the outer ring, not the target body. A near thing, but not the thing. That left one shooter in the final group. Mara stepped up to lane 14's mat, the worn case open beside her, the rifle already in her hands. The senior Pentagon observer set down his clipboard entirely and walked closer to the firing line than any spectator had been allowed to stand all week. Mara settled into position the way she had 1,000 times before, on a different kind of ground, with a different kind of stillness around her. Back home, the wind had never had an audience. Here, it had hundreds of people holding their breath at once. She checked her data book one final time, though she already knew the numbers. 2,300 meters. Elevation correction logged the night before. Wind correction adjusted twice that morning, once more in the last 30 seconds, for the rain that had started shifting the air just enough to matter. Reyes called the wind in a voice that had gone completely flat, the all emotion stripped out of it the way a good spotter strips emotion out of a number that has to be exact. She read the flag herself, anyway, the same instinct that had carried her since she was a teenager, learning to judge moving air across open country, where a missed shot meant a missed meal, not a missed medal. The polite version of this story skips this part, but it matters. She was not calm because she was fearless. She was calm because she had done the work that makes fear irrelevant. The crowd had gone almost completely silent. Even the rain seemed to soften, as if the range itself had decided to stop interfering. Mara exhaled the way she had been taught, slow and complete. and the world narrowed down to the rifle, the wind, and the target sitting 2,300 meters away, smaller than a coin, held at arm's length. Her finger found the trigger. The range held its breath with her. The shot left the barrel with a sound that seemed too small for what it was about to do. 2 seconds passed. At 2,300 meters, 2 seconds is an eternity, enough time for 100 small variables to either align or fall apart. The spotter at the target end called it before the sound even finished traveling back across the range. Center hit. Confirmed center hit. For a full 3 seconds, nobody on the firing line moved. Then the crowd did something it had not done all week. It did not cheer first. It gasped. A single collective intake of breath, the sound of hundreds of people realizing at the same moment that they had just watched something that was not supposed to be possible at that distance. By the official numbers everyone in that sport had agreed on for years. Kessler turned toward the target board with an expression that had nothing rehearsed left in it. His mouth opened slightly. He did not close it for several seconds. The senior Pentagon observer was already moving, walking fast toward the scoring tent, motioning for his 2 colleagues to follow him, his clipboard forgotten on the ground behind him. Reyes did not say anything. He simply turned and looked at Mara, and his face did the talking his voice could not manage. She did not raise the rifle in celebration. She did not smile the way a person smiles for a photo. She set it down carefully, the way she had been taught to handle something that mattered, and she looked once at the target board, confirming with her own eyes what everyone else was still trying to process. The official scoreboard had not even updated yet, but the range already knew what had just happened. The Pentagon team did not wait for the closing ceremony schedule. They stopped it. The senior observer, a man named Holloway, walked directly onto the range platform, where the tournament director was preparing to announce the final standings. He said something low, just between the two of them, and the director's expression shifted from confusion to something closer to alarm. The loudspeaker crackled. Competition officials are reviewing a result before final scores are posted. Please remain in position. That announcement alone did more to the crowd than the shot had. People who had been drifting toward the exits stopped walking. Competitors who had already packed their gear set it back down. Holloway and his 2 colleagues walked the full 2,300 meters themselves out to the target board, where a technical crew was already photographing the hit from 3 angles before anyone touched the target. I have watched silence win more fights than shouting ever did, and that range, in that moment, was the loudest silence I had heard all week. The center hit was not just confirmed, it was measured against the event's all-time record for longest competition verified hit, a number that had stood for 11 years, set by a shooter from a program with 10 times the funding of Mara's unit. Her shot beat it by 41 meters. Holloway returned to the platform with a printed verification sheet in his hand. He did not hand it to the tournament director first. He read part of it aloud himself, his voice carrying clearly over a range that had gone completely still. 2,300 meters, center hit, new event record. He paused, looked directly at lane 14, and added one more line that was not technically required by any scoring protocol. Representing a 6-person reconnaissance unit most of you have never heard of. Kessler stood frozen near his own bench, the printed results sheet from his earlier miss still in his hand, forgotten. The reaction moved through the crowd in waves, the way news moves when nobody quite believes it yet, but everyone wants to be the one who saw it first. Costa, who had been eliminated from contention 2 days earlier, was the first competitor to walk toward lane 14. He did not say anything elaborate. He simply extended his hand, and Mara shook it, and that single gesture did more to reset the mood on the range than any announcement could have. The Baltic shooter who had spoken to her on day 1 followed next. then 2 more competitors, then a small cluster of officials who had spent the week walking past lane 14 without comment. Kessler did not move for almost a full minute. When he finally did, he walked toward Mara slowly, the bet from day one sitting visibly on his face, the kind of expression a man wears when he is calculating exactly how much of what he said is now public record. He stopped a few feet away. The crowd around them had gone quiet again, this time waiting for him. "I said you wouldn't make it to day 7, he said. "I heard," Mara said. He looked at the worn rifle case at her feet, the one he had mocked on the first morning, the mismatched stitching still visible along the strap. "That's not the rifle I thought it was," he said. "It never was," she said. He nodded once, the kind of nod that costs a man something to give, and extended his hand. She shook it. The crowd did not cheer wildly. They did something closer to applauding the way people applaud when they understand, finally, that they had been watching the wrong leaderboard all week. Holloway, watching from the platform, made a note on his sheet that had nothing to do with scoring. The official ceremony resumed an hour later than scheduled. Nobody complained about the delay. When Mara's name was read for the overall championship title, the applause was not the polite kind reserved for an upset. It was the kind that comes from a crowd correcting itself in real time, trying to make up in volume for 6 days of silence. Holloway presented the event record certificate personally, which was not standard protocol. He shook her hand and said something quietly that only she heard, something about reconnaissance units and budgets and the kind of math that never makes it onto a scoring sheet. Rhea stood near the platform, not as her spotter anymore, just as someone who had decided early in the week that this was where he wanted to be standing when it mattered. Kessler watched from the edge of the crowd. He did not leave early, which some who knew him said was unusual. He stayed until the ceremony ended, and when reporters from 2 outlets approached him afterward, he gave them an honest answer instead of an excuse, the first time anyone on that range remembered him doing either. Mara packed the worn rifle case herself, the same scarred edges, the same mismatched stitching, the same weight that had carried her through every lane on that range for 7 days. She did not think the case looked like a museum piece. She thought it looked like exactly what it was, paid for, earned, hers. Word of the shot reached her unit before she did. By the time her flight landed, the small reconnaissance team that nobody had bothered to fund a second shooter for had already started getting calls they had never gotten before. She did not need the record to know what she could do, but she understood, walking off that range, that the rest of the world finally did too. The bet from day 1 was never mentioned again. It did not need to be. Everyone who had been there already knew how it ended.